I want to talk about the concept of meta-narrative. Meta-narrative. Because meta-narrative will help you to understand the importance of the gospel inside of the Bible. Now, I've asked you to read this brilliant paper written by Pastor Timothy Keller called The Centrality of the Gospel. And therein, he says some really deep and profound things and makes important claims which comes out of the Bible about the relevant power of the gospel to shape us and change us. That's incredibly important. But in this video, what I want to help you understand is how the Bible gives utter coherency and comes into utter coherency and unity through the gospel. The gospel is really the key to bringing the whole Bible together. In order to understand this, you need to have a basic understanding of what philosophers call meta-narrative. So let me get into it. Meta-narrative. Meta means beyond or kind of transcending, or some people say meta is about that which is grand and great. So you guys all know what a narrative is a story. There's a beginning, and then there's a middle, and then there's an end, and this happens. Some stories can be small, some stories can be big, and some are important, some are not important. Fine, okay? But meta-narrative is the grand story, the transcending story. It is the story that encompasses all of the story of life. Life, creation, history, the meaning of all life and time and place. That's what meta-narrative means, the grand story. And one of the things the strange things about the time we're living in today is the philosophers have said that we're living in a postmodern period. You might have heard this term. And one of the definitions and key features of postmodernity is that people no longer believe in meta-narrative. That they don't believe that there is a single true grand story that encompasses all of reality, and inside of that one grand story we can find the meaning of who we are, what's going on, and where we are going. Now, let me just say a few things about meta-narrative. First of all, people think one of the reasons why we're living inside of this postmodern period is that there is this powerful push for freedom. I want to use that term, freedom, because if we kill all meta-narratives, that somebody can tell us what is the grand story of like where we are from, who we are now, where we are going, that if you can reject anyone else's account of all of reality, meta-narrative, that thus we are now free, we are free to just pick the one that we want. So that no human being, we can cast off all authority and all other stories, and we can just only choose to make up our own story. We can be our own lords, we can be our own masters, we can be our own saviors. We completely make up and choose the story and meaning of our life with which we wish to have. That is like today's understanding of freedom. And in order to have that understanding of freedom, we have to cast off all other truth claims of and it's not just truth claims like religious dogmatic doctrines and propositions. Really, it's to cast off the whole, all the narrative arc, all meta-narratives. So postmodernity is a time in which we're allergic and we've rejected all grand narratives, all meta-narratives. Now, what I want to say about this is I think this whole idea of, and I'm not the only one, of getting rid of all meta-narrative is complete nonsense and delusional. If you just observe human beings everywhere in all places, it's really obvious that human beings operate inside of story. Human beings need to know, where am I from? Thus, who am I? And then at this time in my, depending on what I am and who I am and where I'm from, I get to know in the present day of what the me is of me. Am I being a good me or am I being a bad me? And then where am I going? I have to have some kind of direction. So tomorrow I wake up and do what? Am I going to get up and then go to work? Well, why? Does that matter? Maybe that isn't actually who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. So in order to assess the meaning of your life, you need to have a narrative. And that narrative needs to be a grand encompassing narrative, because if it's a simple narrative that you can just change tomorrow, then someone can come along and break your narrative and change the meaning of your life, or you can just break your narrative and change the meaning of your life. If it was so easy and if we were so free to just change these things, life would be, I guess, easier, but that's not the way human beings are. We profoundly need meaning, and that meaning is set inside of narrative. And so today, we call it atheism, but really what it is a radical desire for kind of individualistic freedom where the individual completely owns himself. And the way he operates is he gets to choose what story he's in. And what that inherently does is it rejects all other grand stories that our society or your parents or we as a people have embraced for the meaning of our life. And so the other place of skepticism today is that different cultures have embraced different types of meta-narrative, grand narratives of who they are and where they're going. And then now as we compare different ones, we're like, well, we thought that was good, but now that we compare ourselves to them, maybe our story isn't so good. One of the things I really want to say is first of all, human beings have an absolute need for a meta-narrative. We're not spiders, we're not ants, we're not rocks. You wake up every day and you know what? You have to know the meaning of who you are, and you have to have a moral assessment of whether you're doing well inside the story or not. And because if you're doing well, if you're doing well, you're going to feel good about who you are. But if you're doing bad inside of the story, you know what? It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Inside of the story you believe you are in, if you are failing who you're supposed to be inside that story, you know what? You're going to hate yourself. You're going to judge yourself. So you can't only just be the master of yourself, the Lord of yourself, and the Savior of yourself. You know what? Here's the trap. You're the judge of yourself. And you're the judge on the basis of what? Whatever narrative, grand meta-narrative you believe in. So whether people believe in a meta-narrative or not is not optional. It is absolutely not optional. If you're a human being, you believe in some kind of meta-narrative. So let me say a couple other points. I know this is a complex thing, and I'm trying to say this succinctly. So today, a lot of secular, agnostic, atheist, however you want to put it, have cast off all the religious meta-narratives, and they think now we're free. But then you know what they do? What happens is then they think they've gotten all the religious meta-narratives in, but then they just come up with some other meta-narrative, and they slip it right in there. And then, even more so, it's imposed upon everybody else through politics and through pressure, because meta-narratives can't be just done as something by yourself. It's something that we have to believe in, and that's what's going on today. And so, just for example, in our culture, if in traditional Western culture they believed in the Bible, and the Bible said, where do we come from? Well, there was a God, and he was eternal, and then there was nothing, and then he made all of creation. At some point he made us. We were created, and he tells us who we are, and then we now know who we are. We have our identity, and then we now have some standard. It's from God, and then we have a destiny and a purpose, and now there's this question mark of whether we're going to make it or not, okay? But today's meta-narrative is, it all happened by chance, and it was naturalistic, and thus it's its own kind of secular Genesis story. So then today that also says, well, then that means I am, the downside of that looks like, that means you're just a smart animal, right? You're just an overly philosophical animal that needs this weird thing called meaning. But then what we do is then we assign that meaning to us. And then what happens is different people, different groups have that. And then we all, of course, then we fight and we hate each other. That's what's going on today. Now, what I want to do in the remainder of this video is to let you know that the Bible is utterly coherent. It's unified. And it's unified because inside of it is a meta-narrative, and the gospel functions toward, and the gospel points to that meta-narrative, okay? Here, in a nutshell, is the meta-narrative of the Bible. It is this. It's creation. There's a God who created us. Then there was fall. We failed that creation through sin by removing God's great goodness and authority and truth over us, and not living for him, but living for us. It's the fall. And since human beings were meant to be, to have dominion over the earth, and under God, when we fell, all of creation fell apart. So creation, then there's fall, there's sin, then there is redemption. So how is this great loss going to be redeemed? How is it going to be brought back? And then there is going to be what some theologians call recreation, or renewal of all creation, so that now all of the creation is no longer fallen, but healed and glorious and beautiful, and even greater than people ever imagined it could be. So there we go. It's creation, fall, redemption, renewal, or recreation. That's the meta-narrative of the Bible. And this isn't something that we came in with outside and then we impose it on the Bible. There are people who have their own agendas, they have their own ideologies. They look into the Bible and then they just kind of read it piecemeal, and then they kind of put their ideology, or what they're doing is they're putting their own meta-narrative in the Bible. What I just told you, creation, fall, redemption, recreation, is not some human beings going in and telling you it is what the Bible itself teaches. And finally, how does the gospel point to this meta-narrative? Because the gospel is ultimately the grand and incredible news. It is the proclamation that the great problem that we have in life, that the world as we understand it is broken and fallen, because you don't have to be a Christian to experience and notice and feel the pain and misery and horror of sin, death, and curse of sin. But that the good news is that God is going to bring redemption about, and we are living in hope of the recreation and renewal of the world. And that good news of the way he came about is that through his son, Jesus Christ, he has brought redemption into a fallen creation and will take us to the new creation. That's the proclamation of the Bible. That's the good news. And in order to truly understand the gospel, you have to understand the gospel is not just some simplistic message. It is the ultimate culmination and fulfillment of the purposed narrative that God made creation for. So the good news of Jesus really points to us to the true, great, grand story of who we are. And you know what's great? It has a happy ending if you believe it. So brothers and sisters, this is how the gospel and meta-narrative come together and brings a unity and coherency to the whole Bible.